Okay, good morning, everybody. That's the last talk of our course on translating and company logics together with my dear colleague Hercules. Well, in this last talk, I would like to talk about some important question because it has not a solution, conceptual solution, let's say. The idea is, it is possible to recover a logic from its fragments on the one hand, on the other hand, it is convenient, it is desirable. Then we will analyze several examples of one or the other case in which we can obtain the logic from its fragments. Another example in which we cannot, and this generates a very interesting conceptual philosophical discussion about what would be obtained by means of combining logics. And this interesting discussion is that it depends strongly on the formalism of the category of logics used to make the combination. That is, the process is the same, it's a coproduct under category theories, but the results are completely different depending on the notion of morphism or translation to the logic system we are using. Okay? As I mentioned in the first talk, my first talk, there are several problems when we combine logics. This is one of them. But the idea, one of the main problems is how to preserve meta properties, such as completeness, interpolation, and so on. Okay? And as I mentioned in the first talk, you can start with two logics which are complete with respect to some semantics. I think you can perform two kinds of pairing. The syntactical one at the proof theoretic level, and on the other hand, the semantic one, as I showed today. But you have no guarantee that even when L1 and L2 are sound and complete with respect to its semantics, the result of the fabric, the coproduct, is still complete. This is a big problem. It appears was extensively studied on the concept of fusion of modal logic. Then it's not an easy problem. Another problem, related problem, is interpolation, for instance. You cannot any guarantee to preserving interpolation by means of pairing. Okay, this must be studied case by case. Okay, but we will concentrate us in this talk in the problem of recovering a fragment of a logic from its fragments and how it depends, showing you how it depends on the representation of the logics. Okay, the notion of morphism. Okay, but before speaking about this, you may recall that I would, in this course, we only work with propositional logic because we found a lot of complications, technical complications already at this propositional level, but it's possible to extend these techniques to another language, let's say. For instance, first order modal logic, there is very nice work by Alberto Zanardo, Cristina Micas Armadas. To higher order modal logics is also possible to do this. In this case, it is necessary to use, or it's convenient, maybe, to use topos theory. This is done inside the topos. It's a work I have done together with Mica and Cristina Armadas. It is possible to consider non-true functional logics. Remember that yesterday we defined firing of certain semantic structures which are true functional by nature, but there are a lot of logics such defies, for instance, which are not true functional. Then you need to analyze the problem under other perspective by using non-deterministic semantics, for instance. And by valuations, true functional valuations are very useful in this case. And we have also worked with Carlos Caldeiro, Walter Carnegie, and Mica Cristina Armadas on this subject. It is possible to consider algebraizable logics, on the other hand, the very well behaved logics, but which has log ambiguity semantics, algebraic semantics, is possible. For this, I have the work with Victor Fernandez from Argentina. And also it's possible to consider, for instance, directly compute the firing of logics presented by means of non-deterministic semantics. There are recent and very interesting works by Carlos Caldeiro and Sergio Marcelino in this one, from the group of Sanara. Okay. In all this case, it was studied the property of some simultaneous preservation, interpolation preservation also in some cases, and then it is possible, I would like to say to you that it's possible to combine logics presented in very different ways, not just propositional logic, the simple one we have seen here, but it's possible to consider more the logic we normally are studying. Okay? Well, let's analyze then the problem of recovering a given logic from its fragments. Motivated by this problem, I introduced in 2005 in preprint that was finally published in 2007 in Logic Universalis, an approach in which the idea is that the usual firing for logics in which you are interested mainly in the consequence relation, that is, recall the notion of translation. Okay? If gamma proves alpha, then T of gamma proves T of alpha. Then you are interested in principle in the consequent relation because, well, it's very reasonable because a logic is presented by means of consequent relation. This is the Polish tradition, and we have learned that you can describe a logic by means of the consequent relation. But there are meta properties, for instance, the induction media theorem, proof by cases, and so on, which are crucial in order to prove inferences in the logic. You need that meta properties. Then it would be interesting to have translation which preserves that meta properties. And this kind of meta properties, there are a lot of meta properties. Interpolation, for instance, is a meta property, final model property, and so on. But this, of course, you will need a very complex language to format analyze which is a meta property of a logic, and this is a very difficult question. But let's start by a very simple case. Meta properties such as meta-deduction theorem, proof by cases, and so on. These kinds of meta properties are naturally described by second calculi. Second calculi are about meta properties. This very kind type of this very simple kind of meta properties. Okay, because second calculus deals with deductions. Okay, then when I realized that, I inspired by the formal treatment for Hilbert calculi proposed by the group of Sanaras, I decided to define a formal language for sequence in order to deal with these kinds of objects of logic presented by means of sequence calculus, but in formal way. Okay, then what means in formal way? Well, when we describe inference rules in Hilbert calculi, as I explained yesterday, it was very important. I stressed the point that the schema variables are very important because you put your actions and inference rules in an open way, let's say. Okay? Then this is you could say that when you present, for instance, most points as xi implies xi prime, then xi prime, then xi and xi prime are abstract schema formulas. This means that this rule is not presented in an extensional way. What is the extensional way of presenting most points? Simply list all the concrete instances. And this is the way when you present classical logic and you say the inference rules is modus ponens. They put A plus B, B. So then you are putting an extensional presentation of modus ponens. This means that you are enumerating all the instances of modus ponens in that concrete language. But you want to combine that classical logic with modal logic, for instance, you will need more new instance of point. Then you need to put a formal variable to know that this is a variable, let's say, that can be instantiated in any formula. The same happens with sequence. A sequence rule, suppose that we consider a standard rule like this, for instance. Then, when you present this in a usual second calculus, you did well. You say alpha and beta are formulas and gamma and delta are sets of formulas. Suppose that we are dealing with sequence, the more simple sequence, that is pairs of finite sets of formulas, okay? Sets of formulas, not multi-set, nor even sequence of formulas, sets of formulas. Then you say, well, for every set, gamma and delta, every formula alpha and beta, I have this. How can we put this rule, this action, this could be considered as an action in second calculus? The idea is, well, we need to consider two kinds of variables. A variables for formulas, schema variables, and variables for finite sets of formulas. Then we put in our formal language variables denoting finite sets of formulas. That's the idea. Then this action, if you want to see in this form, this is an action in the context of equal calculus. This action is open. That is, in the future, if we combine, we put the same action in another extended language, it will work in the same way, because you can put here any finite set of formulas, whatever be the language, and you can put here any formulas here combined by this original conjunction, but you put here new symbols, okay? Then this is open for combination. That's a very simple idea, but it works well. Okay, this kind of expressions will be called general assertions, let's say. Okay, then, as I said, we will consider two sets of variables. Variables for finite sets intended to represent finite set of formulas, and these schema variables intended to represent arbitrary formulas. Okay? Then we define as usual, a signal to be defined as usual. We require that the connectives are different to the variable, and we define a free algebra of formulas in which we are considering, we take into account also these kind of variables just to define the assertions to be defined now. The general assertion then is an expression of this form. We use his semicolons just to put things in a formal way. It's a formal language, then we need to put things in a formal way. A and B are sets of variables for sets variables. There are sets of set variables, and gamma and delta are sets of schema formulas. Okay? That is, formulas constructed from the signature starting with the schema variables. And of course, these need to be non-empty. Okay, the union of these sets must be non-empty. Okay, if we don't use set variables, we have a simple expression without A and B, say, we can think, and we will call simply an assertion. General assertion use set variables. Assertion in general don't use variables. And then, well, instead of writing these kind of things, we use the standard simplified notation. We will write this instead of this. So usual. What is a calculus? A rule. The fact of law. What is an inference rule here? It's, as you would expect, it's a second rule. That is a finite set of general assertions followed by a general assertion, the conclusion. This is the set of premises and the conclusion of the rule. And instead of writing in this form, we will write in the user form of the second rule. Okay? And action in particular will be denoted in this way. Well, it is necessary since we are using variables for sets and for context, the variables are the context of the rule, then we need to define a formal notion of substitution. We need two kinds of substitution, one for the schema variables and the other one for the set variables, okay? It's very easy to do. We start with the standard substitution for the schema variable, which of course can be extended in unique way to anomorphisms in algebra formulas. And then we use a map lambda, the name and instantiation, with changes or replaces a set variable by a finite set of either set variables or formulas. You put all together in a set, because when you are instantiating second rules, maybe certain context is convenient, a context X, it could be convenient to be, for instance, instantiated in X together with the formula psi, for instance. If you, for instance, you are considering weakening, just to give an example. Then this is why by set variables, the context of the rules can be instantiated for another context, maybe the same, the empty set, for instance, you could put here the empty set, or then you delete the context, or then you put variables and formulas, okay? Then you apply this pair to a general assertion in a very natural way. I wouldn't enter here in details, but it's very natural, this application. The detail you will find in the slides that we will here. I don't know if Ronnie has decided how to distribute the slides, but all the slides will be available for you. I think that will be convenient to understand better this stuff. Okay. Well, then with this notion of rules and instantiation of rules, we have the notion of derivation, which is exactly the same as in Hilbert calculus. It's the same way. The only difference is that this calculus deals with general assertions instead of formulas. This is exactly the same way. Okay? Then you start with by using instantiation of rules. Okay? Then you instantiate the rule. You put the conclusion and instantiation is the conclusion of the rule, provided that the same instantiation to the premises is already present in the derivation. It's exactly the same definition. Okay. Then you say that delta follows from gamma. Delta and gamma are set of formulas. If and if this assertion, that is a general assertion without set variables, is derivable. Okay? Then you could consider also derived rules, okay, as a statement. You can define it. If you can derive this by taking this as additional hypothesis, but you can instantiate its premises, then you have a derived rule and you can formulate this in this semi-formal expression. Okay? For all gamma I prime, delta I prime, gamma prime, delta prime, if it holds, then it holds, representing this. Okay? Well, you can compose, the idea is, are these derivations structural? Then the calculus is structural, provided that you define the right notion of compositions of these pairs. Then you can define the product, the composition of these pairs in a very natural way. I don't enter once again in details here. And it has this property, the product of two pairs applied to a general assertion is the same that applied the first pair, and after this, the second pair. It's exactly the notion of composition. And then by using this, you can prove that derivations are stable under compositions. Okay? Then, if this is derivable in calculus, then any pair applied to this generalization is also derivable from the same pair applied to the premises. Okay? In particular, since here we don't have variables, it's enough to consider the standard substitution sigma. Then, if delta follows from gamma, then sigma of delta follows from sigma of delta follows from sigma of delta. That is this multiple conclusion relation defined by this calculus is structural. Okay, what about weakening or this is an interesting structural rule that fortunately you don't have granted in general. That is, these calculus are not monotonic in general. Okay, if you want monotonicity, that is the weakening rules to the left and to the right, you need to put this explicitly. Okay, then weakening established for multiple conclusion consequent relations, you state that if delta follows from gamma, then the delta plus delta prime derives in gamma and gamma prime. Okay. In order to have this, you need to ensure that this rule holds. But if you don't put this explicitly, this rule does not hold in general. Then we have non-monotonic reasoning here for free. Let's see. If you want the standard Tarskian relation, which are monotonic, then you put explicitly these rules. Okay, and it's very easy to prove that this rule guarantees this meta property by taking distanciation. Okay. Well, let's see one example. Too much definition. Let's see one concrete example. The logic for instance, how you represent classical implication by means of these standard rules. Okay, and observe that these rules speak about an implication, that is, a connected appears here. But there are rules that don't speak about any connective, as for instance, the rule we have seen here, this Weakening rule, does not speak about any connective, this is a structural rule, okay? Weakening. And cut rule is a typical case of another structural rule. This rule does not speak about any special connective, okay? Then this rule is a pure rule, let's say it's a structural rule. Then it is, as in this presented field, is open. Then if you combine, you put this calculus with cut rule inside another calculus, the other calculus will still have cut rule. That is, the meta property of cut rule of cut will be preserved. Okay, that's the idea. As well as weakening, for instance. This monotonicity. Okay. Now, it's by structurality, these very general rules presented this way correspond by means of instantiation to these concrete rules in a second calculi. Okay. And the details, but it's very easy to see this. Okay. Another example, inductionistic negation. This is interesting because in general, when you present the calculus, second calculus for inductionistic logic, you put the restriction that on the right-hand side, you have only 0 or 1 formula. That's the trick in order to avoid the derivation of the excluded middle on the right-hand side. Okay? You can derive if you don't put the restriction by using the same rules of inductionistic logic. You derive on the right-hand side psi and not psi and not psi exactly. Then you put the disjunction and you derive the excluded middle. In order to avoid that situation, you say, well, we are obligated to consider just 1 or 0 formula on the right-hand side. Well, we maintain this tradition, let's say, and then we will consider second calculus in which the rules, as you can say, only have, in this calculus, we observe that we don't have set variables on the right-hand side. Okay, we don't have. Then, otherwise, we could substitute that set by several formulas, define a set of formulas, then we will obtain several formulas on the right-hand side, but we are forbidden in any variables present on the right-hand side, set variable, then we cannot do this. And by design also, we are explicitly putting just 0 or 1 formula, you see? Then, by definition, in this calculus, we cannot do nothing with more than 1 formula on the right-hand side. And it was defined in this way, okay? But it's not a general restriction on the assertion calculi. This assertion calculi in particular has this feature, okay? Because we want to do it with form. We can do this, okay? We can define specific second calculi with specific properties. And it's very easy to see that another thing. Observe that the first rules are, all of them are structural. And why this is extensionality, okay? This is left weakening. Observe that we put 2 rules of left weakening, because one when we have 1 formula and the other when we don't have any formula. We need to put explicitly both of them. It would be, in general, it would be easy to put here a variable y, let's say, or z. I could do this, but if I do this, then that z will be instantiated in more formulas. Then I have the problem that I want to avoid. Then I am obligated to consider 2 rules, okay? But it's not so complicated, yes.
Have you thought about using some kind of restriction in the rule, like putting the set variable but imposing that it has a both 1 formula, for example?
Yes, it would be possible also. The result will be the same. The idea is describing some calculus by means of this kind of rules.
It's just an aesthetic difference.
I decided to put in this way because, well, I think that is observe that the same phenomenon happens here. We have 2 cuts, let's say. It's the same cut, but the cut in 2 situations. A cut in which we have 1 formula on the right-hand side and another cut when we don't have anything on the other side. Okay? The same 2 cut in 2 different situations. The 2 possible situations we can have in this specific calculus. Okay? And then we have finally the rules for negation, the safety negation, this one. Okay? From gamma we deduce if from gamma we deduce nothing, that means an absolute, then we derive gamma in the same context. And if given a context, if a context derives psi and another context derives not psi, then both contexts derives a contradiction, but since we don't have a conjunction here, we put here nothing, which means absolute. Okay? And it's very easy to prove that this standard rule for implicit negation can be derived in this calculus. Okay? The derivation. Okay. What about classical negation? Well, take the same calculus and add this rule which encodes double negation. Okay? Double negation is the same as the formula of double negation. Well, this is described by this rule, as you know very well. Okay. And this calculus is also sound complete for classical negation, but it has no theorem. Okay? It's very logical negation has no theorem. Okay. And observe that proof by cases can only be proved in the calculus for classical negation. That is, if we want to prove that is starting from these premises here and here, we derive here this one, proof by cases, we eliminate this. This, in certain manner, is in quotes, the excluded middle is hidden there, semantically. We need the use 2 times of this new rule for classical negation, here and here. Okay? Then this proof by cases only holds in classical negation and not in negation. Okay. Well, now we will define finally the notion of translation, hypertranslation, which gives after that gives origin to the notion of contextual translation that Jacques has presented some lessons ago. Well, the notion of propositional signature morphisms is defined in this in a way that Erwin has mentioned. Instead of taking every key k-area connective into a k-area connective of the other signature, we will consider a bit more general notion in which, of course, the schema variables keep untouched because of the variables. Then if we translate the rule must be, the variable parts must be untouched, okay? We only deal with the connective. Then, if we consider this, yes, if we take an n-area connective, we translate it as a formula which depends at most on the schema variables psi1, psi-n. The idea of schematic translation, not relation. Okay, this is kind of schematic translation. It's preserved exactly. In this way, you can translate, for instance, you can represent the junction in terms of negation implication, for instance, or something like this, in classical logic. You can translate the presentation of classical logic into another presentation of classical logic. It is a more interesting notion of signature morphism, and it has the same properties. For instance, monomorphisms are injected. For instance, that fundamental property is preserved by the notion. Okay. Identity morphism defined transforming in this way, very natural. Okay. Then, with this notion, we can translate rules. Okay. We can translate starting with general assertions. We can translate an assertion as follows: set variables keep untouched. Okay. You don't do nothing with variables, set variables and schema variables. So you don't do nothing, and you only translate the formulas. Then translation of general assertion is defined very naturally in this way. Okay. And then with this notion, you define a category of multiple conclusion consequent relations or commutative second calculus. Okay. What is a morphism between two assertion calculi? It is a morphism in the underlying signatures such that for each rule in the first calculus, the general assertion age of the conclusion is derivable in the second calculus from the premises. Okay, the conclusion of the rule, the translation of the conclusion of the rule is derivable in the second calculus from the translation of the premises, as you would expect. The more natural notion that you can imagine. Okay. Then this defines a category of multiple conclusions, consequent relations. And then observe that since we keep fixed the variable part of the rules, that is the variable, the schema variables, and the set variables, keep untouched, then the rules are maintained, are preserved in the most general form. Okay? In particular, if you take structural rules, such as cat, for instance, or weakly, this is translated as itself. Nothing changes. Then translations, these are translations between calculi, preserves structural rules in particular. Okay? preserves exactly as they are presented. Okay? And it is possible to prove that since you are preserving the rules, then you are preserving derivations. It's very easy to prove this by induction on the length of the derivation. That is, if this general assertion is derivable from this one, then the translation is derivable from the translations of vertices. Okay? Then you are translating derivations. And it's a very strong notion of translation. Okay. Very well. Observe that this morphism preserves intrinsic characteristics of the source system. In particular, we consider the inclusion morphism, that is, the canonical injection. You do nothing. You are embedding a language into a larger one. Then the rules keep untouched. Then you are translating the calculus into another calculus which adds new rules, let's say. Then you are preserving not only, if you do this with Hilbert calculus or with consequent relations, you are of course including, you say, well, this consequent relations is included in the other. Okay, and the other can have more connected, but you are including, but you are preserving just the consequent relation. In this case, you are preserving the consequent relation, and together with this, the meta properties which are described by means of second rules. A lot of stuff. Okay? For instance, monotonicity, proved by cases. Okay? As we will see, when you combine, you extend logics, just the consequent relation, you prove, you lose a lot of meta properties, such as reduction meta theorem, proved by cases. You can, not always, but sometimes you can lose this kind of meta properties. Not in this way. Okay. And oops, sorry. And this is crucial in order to reconstruct the logic by means of firing of these fragments. Okay? Then I said a structural rule is translated as itself. Okay? Nice. Then, but there is a consequence of this definition. This is a very strong definition of morphism. Then you don't have so many morphisms. That is, it's harder to define a morphism in this way. For instance, if you want to translate A1 into A2 by means of this kind of translation, it is required that A2, the target logics, must be capable of deriving every structural rule of A1, for instance. Then this is a requirement. There is translation. If there is translation, then we need at least to have this meta property. Okay? Meta property. Okay? Right. But this is an example of translating classical logic into two different languages. We have no time to analyze this. The slides are with you. Okay. Then we will define firing that I called at that time meta firing because this firing which preserves meta properties. Then I decided to call it this way, meta firing, but this is push-up firing. It's coupled or push-up. Okay. It's exactly the same construction we characterize it as a coproduct when we don't share connectives or a push-out when we share connectives. It's exactly the same construction, but in a different environment. Well, it is possible to prove, we need to prove, because we have changed the category of signatures. It's not the category we have seen some days ago. Is the schematic notion of translation between signatures, but it is easy to prove that coproducts are defined exactly in the same way. That is, a coproduct of two signatures in this category is exactly formed by the addition union of the connectives. Then this does not change, fortunately. And then we can define the given two assertion calculi, its firing is the coproduct in this category of multiple conclusion consequent relations of both calculi, defined over the coproduct of the signatures, okay? And the injections are the canonical injections from the signature, okay? And the rules are exactly the translation of the rules. It's exactly the same definition as Fabrin in Hilbert calculus. It's exactly the same definition. The only change is you need to adjust the notion of morphism between signatures and, of course, the definition of the rules. In Hilbert calculus, a rule is a pair formed by a finite set of formula and a formula. The rules here are rules, second rules. The only difference, but formally is the same construction, right? We can consider a diagram. This is the coproduct. We have two signatures, and we define the coproduct, which is the addition union. And this is the diagram of the universal property it has. That is, observe that you start with 2 points. This is the original diagram informed by 2 points, 2 objects, just no arrows between them, just 2 points. This is the starting point when you define a coproduct. Then the solution, that is in categorical terms, the co-limit of this diagram formed by just 2 points, is an object with 2 arrows pointing to that object. Okay, these are the canonical injection. This is the coproduct in this case. And what is the universal property of this solution, let's say? You have another solution, that is, you have another object, signature in this case, and 2 morphisms, signature morphisms there, that is another solution, is the same as this, okay? You have another guy with these properties, then there exists a unique arrow here, which computes both triangles. This is equivalent to say, well, it's something like say, well, we are computing the supremo of 2 elements in a lattice. It's exactly the same idea. Moreover, do you remember that Hercules, when he introduced category theory, he showed to you that there is a very simple example of category in which, given by a partial ordered set, you have a partial ordered set, then the elements of the partial ordered sets are the objects of the category, and given 2 elements, you have an arrow if and only if the element, the source, is less or equal than the other. Then the arrow is the name of the situation that x is x less or equal than y. You have 0 or 1 arrow between 2 objects. Well, if you consider that category, a coproduct between 2 elements of the partial order is exactly the supremum. Okay? This is why it is a generalization of the notion of supremum. It's the nice things that category theory has. It generalizes a lot of concepts in order to understand well, better the concepts. Then in categorical terms, this would be the coproduct. Well, we can do the same. We prove that this construction induces a coproduct in the category of consequence relation. Okay, by taking exactly the same morphisms. Recall that the morphisms are the same, let's say. We are only requiring that the preservation of rules. Then, given these 2 signatures, we construct this, and then, given the 2 calculi defined over that signatures, we can obtain from that this diagram, okay, in which we are, by definition, we ensure that these are homomorphisms or morphisms between assertion calculi. But if we put here another assertion calculi, in which we know, we are assuming that these H1 and H2 are not any signature morphism. There are signature morphisms which are preserving the rules from A1 into A prime, and the same for 2. Suppose that we have morphisms in MCOM, okay, not morphisms, simply morphisms in signature, but morphisms which preserve rules. Then, in particular, we have this diagram in the category of signatures. In particular, we have this. Then, we know that there exists this guy here, but this guy only compute this diagram, but we don't have the guarantee that it preserves the rules here. In other words, this is a signature morphism, this H, but we need to prove that this morphism preserves the rules, and you can prove that. It's possible to prove that these signature morphisms also preserve the rules, given that these guys preserve the rules. Okay? Then this is a proposition. Prove. Okay? Then we prove that the category of multiple conclusion relations has coproducts. Okay? That is 5. And constraint is 5. Okay. And we can do the same with constrained fabric. Okay? Recall that constrained fabric is just given two signatures, we put here the quantities we want to share. Okay, we want to share some quantities, then we put the quantities, we consider here them injections, it could be inclusions, but in general we put injective signature morphisms there. Then we compute the coproduct and then the co-equalizer of these two parallel arrows from C hat, things, into the coproduct, which is equivalent to consider the push out of the original diagram C hat, C prime, C2 prime. Then we have here two arrows. This is the push out is equivalent construction. This can be done in signature, the category of signatures. But suppose that we start with two calculi. Then we use the same trick as employed yesterday. We put here the signature we want to share, okay, and we put here 0 rules, okay, the minimal calculus in that signature. Then this diagram gives origin to this diagram here, signature. Then we solve the problem, that is, we compute the push out of this diagram, and then we need to prove that the resultant morphism here is a morphism which preserves the rules. We need to prove once again that it works in the category of consequence relations, the of multiple conclusion relation, assertion calculi. Then we prove that this is in fact a push out in this category, not only in the category of signatures. Then it's proven, it's not very hard to prove that. Then we have proved that we have also constrained filing in this category. That is, we can perform filing of sequence calculus, formal sequence calculus. Okay? Nice. Well, these are, as I said, commutative sequence calculus. But you have in practice some substructural logics in which you don't have, for instance, we have the permutation of the formulas, of course, of the context. We have exchanging, taking from Grant, because we are dealing with sets, okay? And we also have monotonicity weakening. But there are substructural logics, such as linear logic, for instance, but there are several other substructural logics in which this property does not hold generally. Then it would be better to work with multi-sets of formulas, for instance, instead of set of formula, because more than one appearance of a premises or a consequence is different to having more than one is different to having just one, for instance. Then you need to pay attention to that detail, then you use multi-sets. But if you don't have exchange, then you need to use sequences instead of multi-sets. Then it's possible to do this. I do this in that paper. Then it's possible to generalize to finite sequences. Okay? And you can adapt all the definitions of instantiation and so on. It's a bit more complicated, but not too much. You can prove that you have filing in the same way. Okay? It's the translation, for instance, given a signature morphism, you translate a generalization. Generalizations now are a sequence of symbols. Each symbol here is either a variable for sets or a the formula, okay? Then you translate symbol by symbol in the same order it appears. You need to be careful in this case. And then you translate rules as usual. Amorphisms in this category of sequence calculi, preserve rules and so derivations. And then you can prove that there exist both forms of metafibrine in this calculus, okay? In the same way. And then it's possible to go beyond this. Consider hypersequence calculus, as Ofer Ariely has shown to you. It's very interesting because you can analyze more interesting meta properties of logics, and this work we done with Martin Figado. We have extended that framework to hypersequence. If you are interested in that, we can send to you the paper. Okay. But the idea is, why it is interesting, okay, it's okay, but why we are doing this is just curiosity. We are, well, in principle, you present this because what is possible to do. Okay, but why it would be interesting? Why not keep just on the level of combining semantic stratus or combining Hilbert calculus and so just this? Why is second calculus? Well, first, you want to combine linear logic with another logic, you need that general framework because linear logic is not a Tarskian logic. Then you need to just use second calculus at least, or hyper sequence, but not Hilbert calculus. Okay? First thing. But the other thing is the problem of recovering a logic from these fragments. Then I will analyze this question now in the rest of this lesson. Let's mention here a sentence by Lokabai in one of his papers, Fabian Logic, 1999. He said, given logic system L1 and L2, then the combination L1 star L2 is the smallest logic system given for the combined language, which is a conservative extension of both L1 and L2. This is the idea, the desiderata of Lokabai. If you want to combine the logic, you should consider the least conservative extension of both. This can be described more or less with the notion of Copeland. But we will see that it is not so easy. Copeland. But previous years ago, in 1996, Luis Farina Cerro and Andreas Harasik in Toulouse, they obtained the so-called collapsing problem. It's very easy to present, and that is astonishing. If you combine classical logic with intuitionistic logic, both implication collapses. Then the logic collapses, okay? Because the negation also collapses. The idea is very simple. You start from this, and with this slide behind this is the Dasho meta theorem. Okay? From phi implies psi, suppose that the implication, we have two implications, one and two. One is classical and the other is intuitionist. Okay? Then, from this formula, you derive the same formula. This is reflexivity. Okay? Then, you, by the deduction meta theorem, you can put phi into the left-hand side of the segment. Okay? And then applies once again the deduction meta theorem for the other connected, for the other implication. Then you prove that the one implication derives the other, and of course you can do the same proof in order to prove that both implications perhaps. Okay, that is a very big problem. Apparently we cannot combine intuitionistic logic with classical logic. And of course, one of the projects, and this is the meta property that was preserving the combination process. Is exactly what I said, that is very good in my previous slides, I say, well, I want to preserve meta properties, but well, if you want to preserve meta properties, you will face with this big problem. Okay, and that's the problem. Of course, by the way, there are several solutions to this problem. One of them was presented by Walter Camilleri, Christian Sarnaz, and Joan Rasga in the modulated filing. Another one by Carlos Calero and Ras, remember the name, another colleague from the IST in Lisbon, called cryptofibrin. And recently, Kravitz has presented, probably you have heard about that, the so-called ecumenical logic, which mixes classical logic with inductive logic in an harmonious way. That's the name, ecumenical. This ecumenical conversation between two different approaches to logic. Then they are peacefully living together. And this is also a solution to this problem, because in fact, Kravitz is combining classical and inductive logic without collapsing. Then the problem was solutionated, but it is there. Okay, it happens, it can arise because of an interaction pool. Okay, this is called the collapsing problem. But on the other hand, well, if you think that interactions are dangerous and it's better to avoid it, then when you combine two logic, you could be extremistic and say, well, the consequent relation then of A1 combined with 2 will be simply the union, the addition union of A1 and A2, but hardly this could be considered as a combination of A1 and 2. If you are combining, say, two atoms of hydrogen with oxygen, you want to obtain water, not simply to hydrogen and one oxygen. Okay? You want to obtain something new, the idea of combining. Okay? Then some interaction will be expected, of course. Right. Let's analyze, but let's see some examples in favor of this position of that it is good to obtain interaction laws. This example was presented in that the first version of metafibrin, in that preprint of 2005. Combination of classical negation with classical disjunction. As you know, if you take the two tables for classical negation and two tables for classical disjunction, you obtain classical logic. You can recover all the other economies by definition, let's say. But it's a property of Boolean protocol. Okay, but if you combine the Hilbert calculus, you can define a Hilbert calculus for classical negation and a Hilbert calculus for classical disjunction. It's very well known. You can define inference rules in the sense of Hilbert calculus, not in the sense of sequence calculus. You take rules in the sense of Hilbert calculus, okay? Then you take the coproduct that is you put together both rules, of course, allowing the mixed language. You obtain now a mixed language with conjunction and disjunction. Then you can instantiate both different rules in both connectors. Nice. But you can do the same thing in the category of consequent relations also. But this three-value logic is a model of this combination. And clearly, in this model, the excluded middle does not hold. Then you cannot recover excluded middle by combining the Hilbert calculus of classical negation with the Hilbert calculus of classical disjunction. And the same happens if you take the supremum of the consequent, the Tarskian consequent relation of conjunction with the negation with the Tarskian consequent relation system for classical disjunction. You cannot recover excluded middle. Okay? But maybe you would like to recover because you say, well, I would like to recover classical logic from fragments. And in this way, you cannot recover. Okay? Of course, you take the assertion calculus, you recover that. One problem with this, if you want to see this as a problem, is that a specific meta property, this property of disjunction of negation, sorry. Remember that when I presented two assertion calculi for negation, one for intersynthetic logic and the other one for classical logic. Do you remember? And I proved that this meta rule, meta property holds. What? Then this meta property holds in the assertion calculus for negation only. This only speaks about negation. Okay, there is no disjunction here. But this meta rules is preserved by the process of combination, the coproduct, let's say, because you translate all the rules that you have. And in particular, this rule will be transferred in assertion calculus. Does not happen with Hilbert calculus. Okay? You can prove, given the Hilbert calculus for negation, you can prove, to give a proof that this happened because how can you prove that? Well, you analyze how are the derivations in a logic that just has a classical negation. It's very simple. You have only elimination, double negation, or inclusion, double negation, and explosion, the only thing that you have in that logic. Then you can prove that it holds. But when you combine with disjunction, then you lose this meta property. Okay? That's the explanation of this phenomenon. This caused because a meta property was lost in the combination. Okay? Another example in the same preprint, combining implication with negation is something similar. In this case, it's interesting. We lost the explosion law, let's say. In the business language does not hold if we combine implication and negation in using actions, let's say, Hilbert calculus or direct and consequent relation. We lost this problem. And this matrix due to Urbas, Urbas, shows that this doesn't hold. It's a model of both logic that does not validate this. Well, wait a minute. This means that if we combine the Hilbert calculus for negation and for implication, we get a paraconsistent logic. Strange. No, it's not that. The logic is not, it's explosive. That is, from the contradiction, we derive everything. What we lost is the deduction meta theorem. It's a different thing. Okay? The logic explosive is not paraconsistent definitively, but from this you cannot use the deduction meta theorem in order to obtain this formula. Okay? We lost the deduction meta theorem, not the explosion law, of course. Right? And of course, if you use assertion calculus, you can obtain exactly classical logic, no more than this. You recover classical logic by combining the second calculus for negation and the second calculus for implication. Or is that it works? People that work with second calculus know that. Second calculus are modular, let's say. You define rules for each connected separately, and then you put together and you obtain the logic that you want. That's the idea. We want to preserve here. But as the collapsing problem shows, it's not so good in every situation. Such a powerful environment as second calculus, sometimes, as in the case of the collapsing problem, you obtain things that you just not good. It's not good to collapse implication, a classical implication with independent implication, as the problem that you have, you preserve the meta properties. Then, so there are not an easy answer to this problem. Okay? This example was studied by Jean Plessieux and I. At the same time, the combination of conjunction and disjunction. Okay? Once again, the problem here is that the idea is if you combine conjunction with disjunction, the resulting logics should become distributive or not. Then it depends on the formalism you are using to combine. For instance, if you combine both logics in the category of consequence relations, classical consequence relations, okay, this means that the firing, the co-product is just the supremum of the consequence relation, and how you define the supremum of this consequence relation. It's just take the infimum of the consequence relations in the mixed language that contain both of them. This is the supremum, okay? And you can find a model of this which is not distributive. Take the logic of lattices, okay? Logic of lattices are defined in this same language, okay? And you can define phi follows from gamma in the logic of lattices if there exists a final subset of the premises. Recall that in this logic you don't have theorems, okay? Then gamma 0 must be non-empty, such that for every homomorphism in the language of conjunction and disjunction into lattices, the infimum of the value of the premises is less or equal than the value of the conclusion. By defining this degree preserving of relation, then you have a model, of course, of both the logics. Both of the logics are contained in this logic, and so is the supremum. Okay? Then the combined logic of conjunction and disjunction is contained in the logic of lattices. It's not the same logic. But of course, the logic of lattices is not distributive since there are non-distributive lattices. Then this shows that we found a model of the firing which does not satisfy the distribution law. Then the firing is not distributive. That is, this meta property is lost in the combining process. Okay, and the same can be proved if we perform the firing in the Hilbert calculus of the Hilbert calculus. Okay, it's very easy to prove that. Then the firing of conjunction and disjunction performed in the category of Hilbert calculi or the category of consequence relations does not preserve or does not generate the distribution law. This is another department, let's say. I don't know if the combination of conjunction and disjunction should be distributive. Maybe not. Okay, but we know that if we combine in the category of second calculus, we obtain distributivity. Because once again, we lost distributivity, or we don't lose distributivity. We cannot generate distributivity because this meta property of disjunction is lost in the firing of Hilbert calculi or consequence relation. Okay, this is the meta property of disjunction, pure property of disjunction. It has nothing to do with conjunctions, okay, but it holds in the logic of disjunction. But if you combine conjunction, you lose the meta property. Okay, combining these categories. Of course, in conjunction relation, you don't lose this property by the same reason. This is a sequence rule, then it's preserved in the firing. Okay. And the same happens with absorption law, by the way. Absorption law, for instance, does not hold in the combined logic in consequence relation and Hilbert calculi. Okay? But it holds in this category. Well, that's the point. The presence or not of distributivity or absorption laws in the combination of the logic of conjunction and disjunction is not intrinsically good or bad feature. It's good or it's bad. I don't know. I don't have an answer to this. I am just only showing to you what happened, what situations can arise. Okay, we can have reasons against or the appearance of these distributive laws or something like this, or in favor or against. Okay, it's a debatable question. Although it might be desirable from the perspective of recovering the logic from the fragments, such bridge principle spontaneously generates per metaphor. could be also seen as intruder. For instance, this could be seen as intruder in the logic of conjunction and disjunction. Or distributive law, for instance, is intruder. I want to talk just about lattices, not about distributive lattice, for instance. In that case, combining into more cautious categories will be preferable. In other words, the choice of the most adequate process for common logic depends upon one components to obtain. Okay? In the same way as the collapsing problem shows the inconvenience of having excess of interaction between the connectives in the combining logics, there are examples of absolute lack of interaction rules when categories such as con or hill are considered. For instance, suppose that you are combining in con or hill the logic of disjunction with itself. Okay? It produces two disjunct copies of disjunction. It does not happen with conjunction. If you combine two copies of classical conjunction, they collapse. But it's not the case with disjunction. And the same happens when favoring in con or hill the logic of classical negation with itself. You obtain two disjunct copies of classical negation. Okay? And definitively not the case with second calculus. These examples of lack of interaction rules could be seen as dual to the collapsing problem, which is excess of interaction rules, and I call that the anti-collapsing problem. Then, as I said, you don't have a solution to this problem. I just presented here. Then it depends upon one we will have in mind when combining logics. Okay? And well, that's all, and I would like to thank you for your attention. Questions? Comments?
Questions?
I'm curious about your opinion, in your opinion, regarding medical systems. I understood that you said that they are not, the purpose is not combining, right? Just understanding inside the system, but from the vantage point of vision.
Yes, I don't know if Travis thinks about combining intuitionistic and classical logic. He wants to put both together, but in my opinion, it's a kind of combined method. By the way, the idea of ecumenical logic is to use translation. It's using, I don't know, it's that is one of the classical relations. You represent, let's say, the grid with the junction implication. Then you represent them by schemas, then it interacts inside using logic. You put a classical negation, a classical junction and classical implication, and it works well. They do not interfere. Then, in my opinion, it's a kind of combination of the logic. But it should be better analyzed on the perspective of combined logic. This is just my conjecture that is indeed Travis is combining logic. Some colleagues disagree with this perspective, I know, but I think that it's possible to see an understanding. To think it is better this question. Yes.
So, is it possible to generate some strange logic that is stronger than classical logic by combining classical logic with something? Is that possible to create generator?
Yes, indeed. You can take, for instance, modal logic. You can combine, you can add new connectives or LFIs, which Eliphys, on the one hand, are weaker than classical logic because the negation is weaker. Okay? It's not explosive, for instance. But you can interpret that as a new negation you add to the classical one. Then you have two negations. Then you are expanding the logic. Then you can expand, in other words, you can expand classical logic with new connective, then stronger logic and classical logic.
I see. So I was actually thinking of like something not like adding new connective, like modern logic.
And adding properties, new properties to classical logic, you can say.
Yeah. Okay. But I don't know. I was thinking like whether it's possible to think of. Of course, I never thought of such thing like strong logic stronger than classical, but stronger, but we don't use any new connective on top of that.
The only way to make them classical logic stronger is by adding new connective because it is post-complete. You cannot add any schema which is not classical because it's closed. It becomes trivial. You cannot add anything to classical logic in the original language.
Good. Yeah, that's very nice. Thank you.
You just answered the question.
Any more questions?
Marcelo, well,
Yes,
one question, we never worked with it. What would happen if you would decompose a logic and this anti-collapsive problem occurs? For instance, they might have memory or maybe you teach yourself, but I don't know. But suppose you decompose the classical, right? Like splitting instead of decomposing, splitting. And you might get two different copies because of this anti-collapsive problem. Would it be thinkable or possible?
Yes. Definitively, if you are working with Hilbert calculus or constant relation, you can decompose the classical logic into split into two fragments and then recombine, and you can obtain the original logic. It's perfectly possible, but depends on where you are doing this. If you are doing this with constant relation, then you will have or Hilbert calculus or must have.
Then
Not
this,
with second calculus.
yeah, this collapsing and the collapsing are kind of poisonous problems that nobody really
Exactly.
knows how to get.
Yes, I would like to call it problem because it's not good or bad. I don't know. Depends.
What about try to create a monoidal structure in these categories? For example, instead try to use some universal property to define what is fiber. You can also try to do more strange stuff. And maybe, for example, using symmetries in automorphism of logics, you can create some kind of construction that can solve this problem. So, one idea. Works or not.
I understand your point. You could say, well, why just think about colimits, not taking another possibility? We think a bit about that with Walter and Juliana, but on trying to decompose by means of limits. It's the same idea inverted. That is how if we compose logic by using colimits, we can decompose by using limits. And we found interesting things, results. We characterize possible translation semantics by means of limits. But you are thinking about more general construction, not just limits or colimits. Yes, it's perfectly possible to do. If you have a good category of logics, then you have the object, which are the logic, you have the relationship with them, which are the translations, the relation, the arrows with them, then you can construct things in that category. Yes. Makes sense, and you are combining, constructing new logic from previous one, that's the idea. Not just forgetting. This is a good way to look at the problem, but it's not definitively not the only way. Combination.